Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Friends Occasionally Not Disagreeing. We're picking up with part 2 of our Star Wars movie ratings
Hey,
that we've been doing.
my lightsaber is still fully ignited.
Anyway, stay along with us here as we keep going through these. All right. Well, dear audience, we've come to that moment that everyone's been waiting for. Next two movies up are Rogue One and Episode 8.
Oh boy.
And then there's a couple movies after that nobody gives a shit about. But anyway, we'll get to those in a minute. So next up, we're going to take a detour as Star Wars, and I guess this is Disney at this point, right? It has to be.
Mm-hmm.
Starting to milk stuff out here.
Well,
Rogue One, a Star Wars story?
Episode 7 was started with Disney, yeah.
That was Disney? Okay.
That was
Yeah.
Disney.
So this is the first of what they had at the time, like several spin-off movies planned, which kind of have morphed into different projects at this point. But
They were originally going to release a Star Wars movie every year.
Yeah.
They're going to have like one of the mainline episodes one year and then one of these Star Wars story spin-offs the following year and just do that for infinity.
And beyond.
Which sounds crazy, but look how many fucking Marvel movies there are.
I was just
You're not
wondering,
wrong.
timeline-wise, Rogue One came out when? Is this? I was just
That would have been 2016, I think.
I thought it
Yeah,
was earlier.
2016.
2016. Okay, so
Because 7 was 2015, 8 was 2017,
Oh,
9 was 2019.
okay. I was wondering where that fell, like when they acquired Marvel as well through that, but it looks like they had Marvel. It seems like before that for a while.
Yeah, well before that.
Yeah, so all right. Anyway, let's talk about Rogue One, a Star Wars story. Just a one-liner on this. In a time of conflict, a group of unlikely heroes band together on a mission to steal the plans to the Death Star, the Empire's ultimate weapon of destruction. All new characters for the most part here on this one. We do get, I think, some minor overlap, but Jyn Erso, Cassian Andor, whoever that is, they'll probably make a TV show about him someday.
Never heard of him.
Orson Krennic, I don't know how to say this one's name, Chirrut Imwe, Galen Erso, K2, SPO, Bodhi Rook, Baze Malbus, and Saw Gerrera. Thoughts on this one? I didn't know what to make of this one when it came out originally, I'll be honest. It was just such a departure from the episode format that we were kind of used to with the central cast of characters. I guess 7 had just come out, so that's, I wonder too, this is just kind of already off on a tangent, but they released 7, and then I know you just said they were going to do an episode every year, but I have to wonder, like, putting this little solo story in the middle of the two mainline episodes, like, I wonder how that impacted both of those movies, actually. Because now you have this new cast of characters from 7. You want to know what's going to happen with them. Like Justin just said, where do these plot lines go? What's going to happen? And then they interrupt you with this other story, which, while standalone, introduces a whole nother cast of characters to you. And so you're like, oh, and then you got to, get back into, I guess in some ways it's not different than what they do with Marvel, where they'll like give you Ant-Man's world and then they'll switch it to Thor or whatever and then kind of go back later. But I just wonder, with Star Wars being so linear, if this kind of hurt the momentum a little bit. I don't know.
The world will never know.
Yeah. I guess for me, in general, prequels are always a hard sell because certain characters at least are safe no matter what because they show up later on. So that a lot of the times that just saps a lot of the tension and interest out of these things for me because there's no threat, there's no stakes. You know how things are going to end up, at least in some ways, by the end. So it takes a really good prequel to actually make me enjoy it. That said, I liked Rogue One overall. It's not my favorite in the franchise by any means, and actually on a rewatch, I don't like it as much as I thought I did the first time. But for what it is, it introduces some characters that are in general likable. I like the droid K2SO. I mean, it introduced Andor, who goes on to have his own prequel to a prequel, which we'll get into that next week, I think. And it's just yes, you know how things are going to end up. You know that the plans are going to get out. they're going to, be given to R2-D2 at the beginning of episode 4. You know how that's all going to end up. But I think this film does an okay job of at least getting us invested in the players involved in getting those plans to where they need to be. So my general thoughts on it right there as in broad strokes.
This was one of the ones I made sure I went back to rewatch this week because I tease Joe at this one all the time for our long-standing rivalry. But I actually have only seen this movie once or twice, so I did want to make sure I went back and watched this one again this week just to really make sure my opinions were solid on what I was talking about here this week. And I would say, there's a little bit at the beginning that's a little slower than I remembered it being. But once they kind of start to go on the mission and they get the band of the characters together, I loved this movie again. This is just I really enjoyed it watching it again this time. I love the little group of 4 or 5. I don't know why, but the characters in this movie balance each other out better to me than any of the episode lined things. I don't know what it is. I love the character. I still don't know how to say his name here. Chirrut, I don't know how to say it. Played by Donnie Yen, basically, but who's the blind master who has the staff and is just so completely devoutly faithful, maybe more so than anybody else we've seen with how he's living his life with the Force. And then his kind of pal, Baze, who has the big laser gun. That's kind of like the Gatling gun, more or less. Forrest Whitaker, who I will admit I looked up if was still alive 3 times while rewatching movies this week. I was convinced he had died years ago, but apparently he's still alive. Jyn Erso is not really a truly likable character, but she grows on me as the movie goes on. And I think I don't know why, but her relationship in this movie with her dad and trying to understand who he was and help save him and stuff works for me more than Luke and Anakin does. Andor's fine. He's cool in this movie too, but yeah, the droid, you mentioned the droid I put as my background tonight. He's hilarious. Oh my God. I forgot how funny that droid was. It's those two and the original 2 are probably
It's okay that they just ripped off HK-47 from the Knights of the Old Republic game.
I've never played it.
Maybe they did. I don't know. Never played it.
It's great. He's pretty obviously based on him. HK-47's even better, but whatever.
I doubt that. But anyway, think here. What else? Yeah, I don't know. So for me, I know Joe's going to shit on this in a second here probably, but this one, I will say when I rewatched, and I don't think I really ever do, but I actually got a little choked up watching this one this week on my rewatch because there was not only the part where the guy with the staff died and his friends watching him go down in the gunfire after he had flipped the switch and just seeing his best buddy bite the bullet. And then also, just the part at the end of the movie, honestly, when they're just watching the planet implode around them and they're going to die, but they had sacrificed what they needed to sacrifice to save everybody else and get the plans off for the Death Star. I don't know. I also am with you, Justin, somewhat, and that prequels are sketchy for me sometimes because I know same thing you're worried about. You kind of know what's going to happen even without the story. Mm-hmm. But this one, for whatever reason, really works for me. Kind of just knowing that they're all going to die, makes their deed that much more heroic for me. Even the people that weren't fully convinced to come on board with that, but decide to devote themselves to the cause by the end of the movie. And I also thought when I watched this the first time, that final scene when they stitch it together with episode 4 and it's flawless, that always I thought was super cool too. It's hard to tell where the one movie ends and the other movie begins. So anyway, Joe, go ahead. We've lost Joe. Oh, here he is. Okay.
I'm not going to shit on this movie. I'm apathetic towards this movie.
Okay.
It's not a bad movie. It's not the worst Star Wars movie. It's just kind of boring, honestly. This is one of the movies that I was intent on rewatching for this discussion because it's an ongoing thing with Cody. And I got halfway through it and realized, you know what? I don't have to finish watching this. And I didn't. And not because it's bad. It just didn't hook me. I mean, it's well made. The cast is all good. the actual, you said that it gets exciting once they're like on the mission, going to the planet to do the big deed. That doesn't even start until like the halfway point of the movie.
Well, I said it gets exciting as they like build the crew more, really.
But this movie is just so slow to get started.
Well, it's a very serious tone, other than the robot. I'll say that compared to the rest of them.
I don't begrudge anybody who likes this movie, but it just doesn't do it for me. I just don't really care about any of these characters. I mean, A2SO is funny, like he's fine. Again, I'm pretty sure he is influenced by a character from the Knights of the Old Republic video game. Really, the only truly amazing part of this movie for me is the Darth Vader sequence at the very end that leads into A New Hope, because there's a sequence where you see Darth Vader going down a hallway just like destroying people, and it's the first time I think in any Star Wars, at least live action, that we've gotten a true sense of like just how powerful, like what a badass Darth Vader was. Like that scene's amazing, but the rest of the movie leading up to it could not care less. Other things I disliked about this movie: CGI Tarkin is fucking terrible. It's an abomination. He looks like Dobby from the Harry Potter movies. CGI Leia is almost as bad, only saved because she's literally in it for like a split second.
Oh, let's talk about CGI Leia.
The like forced callbacks to the original trilogy like make my blood boil. Like, I'm fine with like R2 and 3PO and some of the characters being in the new trilogy because it makes sense from a story perspective for them to be there. Mm-hmm. But to have like the dudes from the cantina from the original trilogy just randomly pop up in this movie. Yeah. It's like, hey, remember these guys? Or like the most egregious thing is 3PO and R2 having a cameo in this movie because they literally just like walk into the frame in a random scene and like have like a split second of dialogue.
It's a Frozen moment.
Hey, aren't these those droids you guys love? Like, fuck you. It's like so pandering.
No, those aren't the droids we're looking for.
Oh, I hate it so much. Maybe I do actively dislike this movie.
You hate Ben Mendelsohn, just say it.
Well, that's the other thing. I love Ben Mendelsohn in general. I don't think he really is given enough to do in this movie.
Can we just appreciate that they finally cast Mads Mikkelsen in something that he lived through? Oh, never mind.
Womp womp. Anyway, by and large, this is like meh.
Yeah.
Like it's again, it's not the worst of the Star Wars movies, but the other thing, and I mean, spoiler alert, this is also true of Solo, which we'll talk about, but it's completely unnecessary. I don't need an entire movie about how they stole the Death Star plans. Like, it's pointless.
I don't disagree with you on that part. Yeah. It's not a story that needed to be told.
Yeah.
I'm going to disagree with you, obviously, in how well it was executed, but...
Yeah.
Anyway, those are my thoughts.
Okay. Take a breath. All right. All right. Let's rate this puppy. Justin?
Okay.
I will say... You called it a 12. Next up, Joe.
No, I will agree with Joe that on a second watch, this movie was slower than I remembered it being. I don't remember the context in which I watched it the first time, but I swear it flowed better then. But I don't know, there's something about it. The parts that are good are very solid, but there's downtime, which it is a darker tone, but it also does drag on occasion. That said, I still enjoy it. It is a movie I'd watch again if it were on. I wouldn't jump at the chance like with some of the others, but I would certainly sit through it again. 6 out of 10.
It's also a mostly singular plot, I guess, as well. Like the other ones have the benefit of having casts in different locations that can kind of hop and bop back, but
yeah.
Cody?
All right. You want me to go next? I'll go next.
I want you to go.
I gave this a 10 out of 10.
Seriously?
I still do believe after rewatching this is the best Star Wars movie. It's much more serious, so I think when you're saying slower, I think it maybe is more the tone than the pacing for me in this one, but I think it's pretty damn good. The only real humor here is the robot, which I thought was hilarious, and really enjoyed all of the people in this cast. So yeah, seriously, 10 out of 10. I really thought upon rewatching it, I really almost cried twice watching this week. I thought it was a great movie.
All right. I mean, for me, the best thing about this movie is that it introduces the character of Cassian Andor, who would go on to become the focus of possibly the best Star Wars thing ever created, which is the series Andor on Disney Plus. So it actually gets a little bit of a bump in rating from me just for its association with that. I give it a 5.5 out of 10. It's a competently made movie. Like I said, the cast is all good. It just doesn't do it for me.
Okay.
That's fair. All right.
I will say, while we were talking, and this might go to mollifying a bit of the unpleasantness that's going to come in the next movie or two. While you guys were chatting, I did look up on Steam, and I saw that both KOTOR games were like $10. So I used some of the gift card that you gents so thoughtfully got for me for my 40th birthday and picked those up. So as a bit of an olive branch towards trying other good Star Wars content.
Well, you get back to us on
I love those games.
Also, you're old. God.
I know.
Jeez.
Let's hurry this up. It's my bedtime.
I'm gonna be old 2 weeks from tomorrow.
Oh, God. Yeah. You're old. Yeah. All right, so hot off the heels of the mega successful Rogue One, a Star Wars story.
Oh boy.
They went right to Solo, a Star Wars story. And then they did episode 9, and that's all they did. Just kidding. All right. Next up is episode 8.
I'm perfectly okay with not talking about episode 8.
I think you're going to benefit a lot from Dave not being here, I'll be honest.
Oh, boy.
Because I think he was ready to really punch you there. But anyway, so one word on this, one line, I should say, Star Wars Saga continues. Who wrote this? I stole this off some website. It says, new heroes and galactic legends go on an epic adventure, unlocking mysteries of the Force and shocking revelations of the past. Boy.
Sure sounds like a Star Wars.
It does sound like that. New characters, Rose Tico and Vice Admiral Holdo. Big movie for O's, I guess, on this.
Oh, yes, it is.
Should we start this one with some comments from peoples, or should we just do your mom jokes? Because that's how the movie literally started.
Yes, it is. Oh.
Which, while funny, I was like, is this Star Wars? What's happening right now?
Listen, George Lucas's Star Wars was always a little goofy. And I feel like this is kind of returned to that. Also,
I think it was goofy in like Star Wars universe, though, not like 6th grade boy.
Yeah, not your mom is so fat she, creates her own gravity well or whatever. It's.
I don't think he actually says that.
That's fair.
But he was leading into your mom joke. It was implied.
I mean, he also calls him General Hugs.
Yeah.
That's cute.
Love it, because he's like purposely trying to get a reaction out of Hux, and it works. And
yeah, but it shows that
I am an unapologetic Rian Johnson fanboy, so I'm going to put that out there from the start.
We know.
I mean, you definitely get his humor in this movie, and I will admit, I mean, I remember posting on Facebook when I first saw this movie that I love the movie overall, but I wish they had dialed the humor down like 25 to 30%.
Yeah, that probably would have helped me a little bit, I think.
Go on.
Oh, go ahead, Justin.
I was going to say I could deal with the humor if they had worked on the verisimilitude, the believability of what they were trying to portray in a lot of this. So, first off,
examples. Go ahead, Justin.
Space doesn't work that way. You run out of if a spacecraft is moving through space, there's no friction, there's no drag, there's nothing to slow them down if they stop burning their engines, and everything in space has a terminal velocity where you keep pushing against that, you're not going to really go any faster. In the big chase scene in this, They've been burning their engines at full bore for a good long while. Engines on the freighters, which I will quote from the movie, are lighter and faster than the Imperial or First Order ships chasing them, and yet they won't outrun them. So Rian Johnson doesn't even know how speed works, let alone space. So, but they run out of these, in the chase, these ships run out of fuel, and then they just sort of like start drifting, and like they're running into wind or something, and it's like tumbling backwards, and that is not how space works. If there was some sort of friction, some sort of force, some sort of medium they were moving through to like give drag to their momentum, sure, they would start to fall behind, but their momentum would have been constant, because they were already theoretically at least going at the max speed they could, because they've been going at it for however long the chase had been going on after they started burning after exiting flight speed. It's just, you don't just start losing velocity.
Okay, can I motion that we don't spend too much time on this point?
Why? It's kind of important. I mean, we can leave it there, but I'm just saying space doesn't work that way.
I'll play middle ground.
It's a fucking science fiction fantasy movie.
I'll play middle ground and just say there's things about the space that don't follow in this movie, but there's things in other movies in this entire series.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't think you can hold that against this movie and not also fault all the weird physics in all the other Star Wars movies.
I think can't shit blow up in space? Isn't that like a space rule? Because there's no oxygen. So how does shit blow up constantly in all these movies?
It's the air. It's the
inside
atmosphere inside. Yeah. So yes, it's overblown, and yes, there's sound in the space in this, but that's for the audience's benefit. But it's not. There's no audience benefit if shit like that just starts happening.
All right.
Okay, fine. If you don't want to do that point, let's talk about the bombers, the worst ships ever designed in the Star Wars movie, where they've got these massive payloads of bombs and they move at a snail's pace, and they can only drop them straight down. If only there was some way to propel explosives through space so that maybe they would hit your target without you having to be directly over the damn thing. Then, maybe that would have been a good tactical decision, but whoever designed these ships was a moron. There is just so much in this movie that
I didn't think about that one.
Yeah, yes, and you can see they're on magnetic rails that throw them downward once they're activated. That could propel them away from the ship and make it so that this big, vulnerable, unshielded mass of just explosives isn't hovering right over its target all the damn time. It's like Rian Johnson wanted to make a World War II movie, and he was told no, so he's like, fine, I'll take Star Wars and turn it into a World War II movie.
Star Wars was a World War II movie. That's literally what the original Star Wars, A New Hope was.
Well, yes, but it had its own flourishes to it. It had its own...
Can we talk about actual, plot points? I feel like there's a lot you guys are going to want to complain about relating to that. I just don't want to get hung up in this sort of minutia when there are, bigger things to talk about.
Oh, we can.
All right, I'll throw a couple out there. So things in this particular movie that I wrote down as things that bothered me. Number one is not unique to this movie, so you don't have to defend this, Joe. I just wrote the 4 words, Adam Driver cannot act. All right, I'm going to move on to the next one. Okay, so things that bothered me on this one is Princess Leia flying through space with the Force. And only really because we've not seen her use this at all. We've heard Force sensitive and blah, blah, blah. But B, no one has had this ability really that we've seen. People have jumped a little bit with it, but suddenly she's Supermaning through space to get back to the ship, which is a little...
I've heard a lot of people complain about this, and I don't know why it's such a big deal, because we've seen people do all sorts of things with the Force. It's no difference than force
not
pulling anything.
Through space. Why does Darth Vader?
He's basically force pulling herself to the ship.
Why does Darth Vader have a TIE fighter then? He could just Captain Marvel through shit in outer space.
This is over a very short period of time.
Maybe.
She's not flying through space. She's pulling herself back to the ship. I don't feel like it's super out of line with other Force powers we've seen.
compared to
Okay, other things I have here.
Like, how is that more unbelievable than like Luke or Yoda lifting an X-wing out of a swamp with the Force, or like anybody, force pulling any object? Like, I don't think it's really any different.
I suppose that's fair. The main problem I have with it is, I would have to go back and see how long that sequence is, but that's a lot of time to be in a vacuum. That's like the only problem, the main problem I would have with that. Without suffering any sort of,
It's I'm
permanent
not
damage.
trying to belabor this point, but it does seem different to me just because, like, if you're going to make the argument that she's pulling the ship towards her is similar to then like moving a rock or something, fine, I guess. I don't know.
I mean, I'm making the argument that she's pulling herself towards the ship, but it's the same basic principle.
But I don't know, because we've never seen anybody be able to use the Force to unlimitedly move themselves in one direction. Like, Yoda can jump so far. These people.
I mean, she's in space, so there's nothing to like restrict her.
I mean,
going back to Justin's physics argument, like,
I like to let you have this one.
There's no gravity or anything to restrict her movement.
I mean, by that logic, then couldn't Darth Vader just fly through space again without his ship? Why does he need a ship?
I will say there would be few things more terrifying than seeing Darth Vader just like drift towards your hull, whip out his lightsaber, and just start carving into it.
There you go. Other things in here, the very urgent message that Maz sends to them that there is one code breaker on the planet that can possibly service their needs, except obviously that's a red herring or something. I don't know what's going on with that. But we do get to see what's his name in the movie, so that's pretty cool.
Benicio del Toro.
Yes, one of the last people I thought I'd see in a Star Wars movie, but
that's fair. He needed that paycheck.
Makes you wonder. I don't know the story behind that. I would guess like he's a secret fan and asked or something, but
probably.
This is not really this is just one more here for me because I stopped watching this one halfway through this week. But anyway, this is not a problem with this movie per se, but it was illustrated at a moment in this movie. So the part where Luke is going, this is how many movies later, and he's still Winnie Wampy here, and he's on his island with his little hut with the books in it, and he's like, I'm going to burn this thing, and then does it, and then Yoda shows up, which I was like, oh, cool, Yoda's here. And then Yoda's like, boom, lightning strike, and burns it, and then Luke's like, panic attack, And I'm thinking to myself, okay, so Yoda's going to show up as a Force ghost here when Luke's about to burn these books that Yoda's like, we don't give a shit about those books. But, like, Yoda didn't show up when Luke was like, oh, this Kylo Ren dude seems like the worst person ever. I'm going to try to kill him while he's asleep. Like, that would have been the moment for Yoda to show up, not like, don't use that lighter. I can use lightning.
I mean, that was like a split second. Like, that wasn't a premeditated thing. Like, it just, in the moment, for a split second, he says that he like had the thought of like ending Kylo Ren's life.
Okay, I use that as an example, but even within the context of this movie,
that moment is one that I've heard a lot of people complain about in this movie, and like, I just don't get what the issue is with that.
It's probably confusing to some people because they show that scene 3 different ways in the movie, so maybe that's part of it. But it's not. This is not on this movie at all. But it just made me really wonder, like, well, first of all, I didn't get how fully the Force Ghost idea works, but like, those suckers are out there and they could step in at any of these times to like guide people or help people, and they're like, no, this is only when the need is greatest. We will stop you and
earn your paycheck. You must.
I guess something. I don't know. So that's actually all I wrote down because that's as far as I made it into the movie. But I think something Crystal Foxes, is that this one or is that 9? That might be 9.
That's this one.
Oh, okay. Something.
Listen, those Crystal Foxes are awesome.
I agree. They were one of my favorite parts of the movie.
I don't necessarily get how they move, but that's neither here nor there. But anyway, all right, Justin. I think Joe's going to want the last word on this one. So.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to mute my microphone.
None of us have mentioned Snoke yet. I mean, we alluded to him like leading, throughout everything we were saying in episode 7. I think we need to talk about him, where he was being built up as like the new big bad. Sure, whatever. He was kind of one note. He was kind of a Palpatine stand-in. Sure, whatever. But he's what we had.
Boy, was he, as it turns out.
Yeah, and he was such a disappointment. like across the board. Like his dialogue was the most off the shelf. You know, your destiny is to join me whether you want to or that's what it's just like, stock villain dialogue. His death was obvious to everyone but him. Um, and it just felt like with him gone, there was no central villain. You could argue Kylo ends up becoming the villain, or he looks like he's about to at the end, but then he's also sort of morally conflicted at the end of this film. So that's not a sure deal. But the it just feels like he was such a wasted opportunity. He we don't know where he came from. We don't know. Well, we do know where he came from because we find out in episode 9 that things happened. But in general, at the time, it's just like, oh well, he has more questions that we don't seem like we're going to get answers to. Like, if he hadn't died, like what would he have done? And it feels like when he does die, we're without a villain. We're without a central antagonist because the First Republic seems like it's kind of falling apart without a leader, even though Kylo Ren does eventually step up, but that's neither here nor there. It's just he just feels like he was such a wasted opportunity. They could have done more with him instead of just Rian Johnson saying, "I'm going to wipe the slate. We don't need this guy." He could have tried to do something else with him. He could have tried to build on his character and make him more interesting. So
I know. I mean, let me respond to that if I
sure.
And I mean, I would like to have a conversation. Like I don't want to. I don't want this to devolve into a shouting match.
Sure, and that's fine. That's fine.
I mean, so I think we should take a step back and acknowledge that the biggest problem with the sequel trilogy is that they did not have a plan going into it, which is a fact that still boggles my mind. Like, I don't know how you resurrect this beloved franchise. You announce that you're making a new Star Wars trilogy. You're bringing back all the characters that everyone loves, and you don't establish an overall vision or game plan for the trilogy before you start filming it. Yep. I mean, for anyone who's not aware, like, they basically, J.J. Abrams made The Force Awakens. They let him do whatever he wanted to do for that movie. Rian Johnson, when he came in to do the second movie in the trilogy, they basically gave him free reign to write and make it however he wanted. And then same for the third movie. Like, there was no overall structure that was discussed, which makes no goddamn sense to me.
I agree.
So, and regardless, Edgar Wright didn't get to direct.
So, I mean, that's the fundamental issue with this trilogy. Mm-hmm. My thing with Snoke is, I think Rian Johnson knew what he was handed in the sense that The Force Awakens is obviously pretty much a remake of A New Hope. Mm-hmm. And, Kylo Ren is set up to be the new Darth Vader. Snoke is the new Emperor. The First Order is the new Empire. Like, all of these things are established, and because they're playing so much with like the archetypes that are established in the original trilogy, like, we don't get any background really for anyone in The Force Awakens. And going into The Last Jedi, I didn't really care about Snoke because he's the Empire. You said yourself, he's a stand-in for Palpatine. Mm-hmm. Like, I acknowledge that there is no development of that character, and I guess I understand how that bothers some people. For me, it doesn't matter because I know who this guy is. He's the ultimate big bad. He's the new Palpatine. Like, I don't need to know anything else about him. And I feel like that's probably how Rian Johnson, I mean, and I haven't read, like, why he made the decisions he made. But I can speculate because I know that he's a big Star Wars fan himself. I would guess that he made the decisions he made because he saw that The Force Awakens was just A New Hope again. Snoke is just Palpatine. And he wasn't, I mean, I will say ironically, he does obviously revisit some beats from Empire, Ari, the Salt Planet, which is stand-in for Hawk.
Mm-hmm. What? Totally.
Although, I mean, the things that happen there are different than what happens in Empire.
Yeah.
But I feel like he wasn't interested in continuing to tell that same story. And I feel like he made a conscious decision to just kill Snoke off in order to try to take the story in a different direction. I mean, you said that they're kind of left leaderless after Snoke is killed, but it's almost immediately after Snoke is killed, Hux comes in and is like, well, there's the battle between Rey and Kylo and the guards, but Hux comes in and is like, what's going on? And he immediately is like, what is his name? What's the title? I forget. Snoke's title.
Supreme Leader.
The Supreme Leader. Yeah. The Supreme Leader is dead. Long live the Supreme Leader. Like, so Kylo almost immediately takes on that mantle, and like it's set up that he's going to be in charge going forward. And I mean, it is kind of twisting the formula, it's not just like, what if Darth Vader had become the Emperor, but it's more complicated because Kylo Ren is so conflicted internally that I think Rian Johnson was trying to set up a more interesting path forward, a more complicated path forward than just having ultimate evil versus good. I mean, to me, the real shame is that J.J. Abrams completely threw out everything that Rian Johnson set up in this movie going into Rise of Skywalker. But I mean, we'll talk about that in a minute.
We'll get there. Yeah.
I think part of the backlash from fans over Snoke also is just that after 7, and I mentioned maybe because these were split apart by that other movie in between 2. Well, maybe not, even if they had been a year apart, but there was just such a percolation on the new character, and there was so much speculation as to who Snoke was.
There was a lot of theorizing.
Everybody wanted him to be someone. Boba Fett was even mentioned in that line of thought for a while, if you recall, along with other people as well. But I think people just expected him to be somebody connected to the series somehow or somebody special, and then he was just offed in a second.
I mean, there were a lot of questions about... There are a lot of questions about Rey's origins, and look how that panned
out. Very true.
We'll get there.
Very true. All right, just a thought.
I do agree with you. The biggest, the core flaw with this whole trilogy is the fact they went in without any plan. I mean, without even any agreement that one director would build off of what the previous had set up. It's
ridiculous.
Absurd. Yeah. Yeah, and if we're going to agree about anything with regards to this movie, it's going to be that. And I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall during that board meeting where they were talking about bringing Star Wars back to into the public consciousness, and just to see how the hell that decision was come to, because I, for the life of me, cannot imagine how they decided on that.
And it's not like they were like, Star Wars, I wonder if that's going to be a hit.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. But I do feel that the answer to trying to go in a different direction wasn't just completely burning down everything that had been set up in the previous film. Change it, build on it, but don't just say, nope, this is all gone, and I'm going to add in this pointless casino planet and kill off the main villain, and then just sort of leave it for the next guy to figure out what to do with it. It just felt like it was. I appreciate the attempt to go in a different direction, but it's like deciding to make a turn on a road and then not actually going down it and then handing off the wheel to someone else. It's just like, oh, it's your problem now. And it just, yeah.
I feel, Cody, do you want to, or do you have more to say, Justin?
I would just be spinning my wheels going over the same stuff at this point.
Apologies because I didn't again finish the second half of this movie. Is this also the one where Luke force projects himself across the universe?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'll just let that comment sit there. No, nothing else for me, I don't think.
Okay. So you mentioned the pointless casino planet.
Mm-hmm.
They saved those animals. What are you talking about?
And I have to say that when I first saw this movie, I did really like it, but I kind of agreed that the Canto Bite sequence was kind of pointless and it felt just kind of tacked on.
Say Cenobite?
However,
Oh.
however, when I just rewatched this movie last night, I actually really appreciated that sequence, and here's why.
Okay.
I feel like Rian Johnson is trying to actually say some things with this movie, and that's why I like it so much. His main message for this movie seems to be that anyone can be special. Anyone can be a Jedi. Jedi, or rather, Jedis can come from anywhere. He seems to have a lot of thoughts about class on his mind in this movie, as he seems to have with a lot of his movies. And with the Canto Bite stuff, I think it's interesting because the rich people that are hanging out in Canto Bite, they say, like, these are the people that are profiting off of the war. These are the people that are making weapons. You know, these are the people that are keeping the war going because it's in their best interest, because they're making more and more money off it. And that's a side of things that we've never seen before. I mean, again, up to this point, at least to the most part, Star Wars has been good versus evil. And we don't really ever see anything outside of just like evil empire versus good rebels. And I think it's interesting that he introduces this wrinkle of like, I mean, you talked about verisimilitude, like this makes it feel a little bit more realistic to me because, of course, as in the real world, there are going to be people that are, you know, they're the people that are interested in keeping this going because they're making all the money off it. I mean, there's a scene where they steal the ship from Canto Bite, and Finn says something to the effect of, "Oh well, at least we stole this from the bad guys. You know, the bad guys that are making the weapons for the Empire." Mm-hmm. And Benicio del Toro's character, he's showing him like a hologram thing. I forget exactly what it is, but he's like scrolling through the weapons that this person who owned the ship was making, and oh, they're selling weapons to the rebels as well as to the Empire. And it destroys Finn's worldview. Like you could kind of feel it in that moment. And I mean, it's kind of the first time that we see like the military industrial complex in Star Wars. So I think if you look at it from that perspective, I think it does add a lot to the universe because it's something that we haven't seen before. And the other thing, and I mean, honestly, like the greatest shame to me going from this movie into Rise of Skywalker, which again, we'll talk about in a minute, is the fact that, you know, like I said, it seems like Rian Johnson is trying to set up the idea that like, it doesn't matter who Rey's parents are. It doesn't matter, you know, there's the stable boy on Canto Bite who we see at the very end uses the Force to pull a broom to him. And it's suggesting that, like, you know, someone from low origins can go on to do great things. And I think that's a really important message. And I think had J.J. Abrams or whoever was going to make the movie after this kind of followed that thread, it could have led to an amazing conclusion to this story while also kind of modernizing it and, you know, making it relevant to today's world, you know, because it does kind of tie into like class division and things like that. And that's why I love this movie so much, because I think he is trying to, you know, expand the world and also make these points about, you know, what it means to have power, where people who, you know, can really make a difference come from. And I think the movie after this kind of shits all over that, but I don't know. I really love this movie.
That you do.
Are we ready for ratings on this one, or?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
Or at least I'm ready if you guys are ready. We've said enough. Joe, anymore? You just finished up yours.
I'm good.
I'll go first, Justin. I'll let you decide what you want to do.
Okay.
All right. Well, it's no love lost here between me and this movie because I have had issues with this in the past. I still think it's one of the weaker ones. I can tell Joe is very passionate about it, though, which I totally respect. Some questionable things in here that, again, I just have a hard time wrapping my head around for decision choices. I guess we are attributing a lot of that to the process in which these movies were made, but, you know, it's possible that if they had a solitary director for all of these, I might have had a better vision. Whether that would have been Abrams' vision or Johnson's vision or whose it would have been, at least it probably would have been more cohesive than it was. As long as it wasn't Kathleen Kennedy's vision, because we don't need to go there. But I have some comments I can say about that whole thing as well. I was reading some comments about her behind the scenes today on top of it all, and just not great. So anyway, I am going to rate this one a rousing 4 out of 10.
Okay.
Bumping it up 1 point for Joe due to
I'm going to say it's higher than I expected.
Bumping it up 1 point for Joe.
Well, thanks.
I'll lead off with that because in our conversation here, my rating also did go up a bit in light of
0.5.
in light of our discussion, our back and forth. Initially, when I set out to rewatch all of these, I expected this to be just at the absolute bottom of the list, just because of the memories I had of it, and how it. A lot of the things we already said. I'm not going to belabor the points. But in talking about it and in thinking about some of the points you made, I can see maybe there was some intent there to try and do something with it, but it never paid off. That said, I'm going to be kinder to it than the 1 out of 10 I was going to give it, and I'm going to say this is a 3 out of 10 because I could see the potential there for maybe some of the stuff to have been built off of, even though it did tear down everything that came before it, but nothing ever came of it. So 3 out of 10 is my final rating on this one.
All right. For me, this is a 9 out of 10. I just love this movie. I think it's working on a lot of levels. One last thing I want to throw in here that I didn't mention is that I feel like it's impossible to separate this movie from the unfortunate passing of Carrie Fisher, because this was her, I think it was her last movie. It was released about a year after she died. And it's just rewatching it, like with that knowledge, it just, all of her scenes kind of hit a little harder. So it kind of unfortunately works on that level too now. But yeah, I think this is almost neck and neck with Empire for me. Not quite up there, especially since it does kind of borrow some of those notes, but it's my second favorite Star Wars, and it's a 9 out of 10.
Okay.
All right. Dave sent in some comments.
Oh, no.
I'm joking. He didn't send in some comments.
Thank God.
No, he did not. All right. So next up is a special movie in my heart. I can't speak for all of you, but it was the only Star Wars movie I hadn't actually managed to get through prior to watching it for this podcast. I made it halfway through this once, though, so that was good. Wait, I wrote this wrong. It says Solo, a Solo story. Solo, a Star Wars story, I think is what that's supposed to say, because we're keeping the little...
I believe it's Solo, a Star Wars story. Thank you very much.
Yes, that's probably true. All right. This one is, again, just a stupid write-up that's on here. It just says, board the Millennium Falcon and journey to a galaxy far, far away. Anyway, this is the old story of Han Solo. We know what this is. So discounting characters that we've seen in prior movies in the timeline here, new characters here would be Tobias Beckett, Kira, Val, L337, or I don't know if it's L337, and Dryden Voss, mainly the new characters in this one. I will say, finishing the movie, it was better than only watching half the movie, for starters.
Oof.
Oh, it's got that going for it. Honestly, this is in a different way, similar to like how I think Joe said we didn't need to hear the plot of how they stole the plans to the Death Star. I don't know that I needed a famous character's backstory to make me view the famous version of that character in a different light as well.
Remember the part where the guard asked who Han was traveling with, and he said he was alone. So the guard was like, "Oh, so you're solo." Literally thing that happens in this movie.
Is that coming through? It's me beating my head on the microphone. Oh, that actually hurt. Dang, those Yetis got the... Anyway. Yeah, so having sat through this for the first time for this podcast tonight, I will say making it through the movie, it was more fun than I thought it was going to be. It's just kind of more of a wacky, lighthearted version of Star Wars in a way. A couple interesting characters in here. I was like Woody Harrelson, everything he's in for the most part. Emilia Clarke, I don't know if she got her justice due in this movie, but she was okay.
I thought she was all right.
Yeah, she was okay.
She didn't have a ton to do, but she's pretty good.
Who was the villain in this movie? His name is escaping me. Oh my god.
Paul Bettany.
Thank you, Paul Bettany. Yeah. Thank you. Vision is the bad guy. And yeah. So, thoughts on this one? Is this one anyone was excited to see come out, or
not in the slightest?
No.
Yeah, I also didn't watch this one until this past week for the podcast because I had no interest in it. I agree with Cody. There's no reason for this movie to exist. And beyond that, I guess the main issue I had with it is for large chunks of it, it didn't feel like a Star Wars movie. At points, it felt like Blade Runner or Warhammer 40K or Destiny for a point or two. It very rarely felt like a Star Wars movie.
I'm sorry. In what way are you saying those choices you're picking?
Well, I'm saying like at the beginning on Corellia, that the whole dingy, industrial feel to that with the hover cars and everything that felt kind of, and the focus on like crime and whatnot, it felt like Blade Runner to me.
Okay.
The train jacking sequence and like even some of the helmet designs on like the pirates and whatnot, that felt like Destiny.
Kind of nervous about our discussion of Andor now.
I mean, there were times it felt like a lot of other things other than Star Wars, and I don't know. It just didn't feel like a movie that had a purpose. And again, it's a prequel. Prequels are always hard sells for me. So I left this one very lukewarm. No pun intended. But those are kind of my thoughts on it. It was just it was one of the movies of all time.
It was one of the movies. Oh, that's amazing. I mean, I also was not excited to see this movie. When it was coming out and they had trailers out and everything, it just looked terrible and unnecessary. And there were stories coming out that they had like an acting coach on set every day for Alden Ehrenreich because he was not doing so well. And it just sounded bad. So I actually saw it like maybe 2 or 3 years ago. Mm-hmm. I didn't see it when it first came out, but I didn't just watch it for this. And honestly, I liked it a lot more than I expected to. I mean, it's not a great movie. But I don't think it's an unmitigated disaster. Like, I think there's a lot to enjoy there. I actually like that it doesn't feel like a Star Wars movie, at least in certain parts, because the one thing that I want most from the Star Wars franchise is for it to like open up and for it to be allowed to feel different from like the mainline films that we've gotten to this point. If
I got a show about tax collection for you then.
Oh boy. No, but like, I mean, spoiler alert for our Andor discussion. I love that show, and I love it because it's like it's very ground level, and like it's not dealing with like these giant grand battles for the most part, and it is kind of dirty and grimy feeling, and it feels more realistic and unlike anything else we've seen in Star Wars. But to me, it still feels like it's of a piece with the Star Wars galaxy. It just has kind of a different feel to it. I don't know if Solo quite pulls that off as well as Andor does, but I am totally down for, you know, entries in this franchise that do explore these different corners and do feel a little bit different than what we've seen before. I mean, there's like the train heist sequence in this movie I thought was great. Like
That's a fun set piece for sure.
you know, I wasn't expecting to get like a classic train heist in a Star Wars movie, but I think it works here. And I mean, you know, I think there are just like small bits of this movie that work for me. I think Donald Glover is great as young Lando.
Yes.
Like, I would have loved to have seen, there were rumors for a while after this came out that they might make, you know, give him his own movie, and I would be down for that. I like Phoebe Waller-Bridge as the droid. I love her in general. So I mean, there are a lot of like individual parts of this movie that I actually really liked. I do think Alden Ehrenreich is not great. I don't think he's as bad as like a Hayden Christensen, but you know, they probably could have cast someone with a little more charisma to play a young Han Solo.
Yeah.
But I mean, overall, I thought it was a pretty enjoyable movie for what it was.
It's all right.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd add too much to this one other, you know, it was a patently fun movie at times, but felt off for what they were trying. I don't know. I guess Han is kind of the jokey character in the old trilogy, but maybe not quite to the level we see in this one. I don't know.
Yeah.
I did like, you know, this one again. They had like some of your messages though. I felt like too with like the Raiders on the bikes at the end. You know, when you find out
Yeah.
it's really just the villain from Captain America and the Winter Soldier, but Falcon and the Winter Soldier. But yeah, I don't know. Not too much else on this one for me, I guess.
I will
Let's
say.
rate it. Oh,
Oh, sorry. I kind of like how they tried to explain the whole like Kessel Run thing. I mean, as something other than just a flub in the terminology. I don't like how the big scary monster they met in that area just decided to chase a little morsel of food into something it should have known would have killed it. That struck me as kind of dumb, but
that's fair.
Yeah, that giant space monster was like, what the hell?
Right.
It seems like something that would come back in some form of some like, hey, you know, there's giant things out there that'll kill people. I wonder if the Empire has run into one of those before, but anyway.
Anyway.
Justin, before we rate this fully, I was just gonna throw two words out at you too, just to get your reaction on this. Darth Maul, what do you got for us? Were you excited about that, or
is he getting his own like movie?
No. In this movie,
in regards to Solo,
I know
God,
in the
I
Henry Holman household, Darth Maul
I
set
forgot
off
about
a small
that,
firestorm. So
wait, what?
I haven't seen Clone Wars, or you know the animated series. So, but apparently Darth Maul somehow survives being chopped in half.
Get some spider legs.
Yeah, but I mean, why didn't Snoke survive that? He was supposedly really powerful in the Force, so why didn't he just like patch himself together and like get himself some spider legs? But since I haven't seen the Clone Wars, I had no idea Darth Maul somehow, you know, lived through being cut in half and dropped down a pit. But apparently he does. So seeing him in the hologram at the end of Solo, it really felt like a glaring plot hole because he dies at the end of episode 1. And here the Wookiees are already enslaved by the Empire, and or they're already enslaved, and that doesn't happen until the Battle of Kashyyyk in episode 3. So it felt like just a glaring, you know, plot hole, or at least, you know, misreading of the timeline. If Darth Maul survived all of that, I guess maybe it works, but I haven't seen the animated series, so I don't know. It felt like it was off to me, but apparently in the extended lore, it is a thing. I don't know. So So if you haven't
Yeah.
like sat through like several seasons of, or however many seasons of the Clone Wars there are, you might be a bit lost at that too. But just viewer beware, I guess.
I guess I knew that he was alive still, but I didn't know how and when or where that was fully explained. But I did know he survived according to some stuff, but I don't know how he survived. Bottom
Yeah.
Yeah,
point
same.
here. I mean,
I honestly, I mean, I knew that he survived in the animated stuff. I thought it was cool that he showed up here. I do think it's kind of a shame that we're probably never going to see him again in live action because I don't think they're going to do any more like spin-offs of this, but who knows?
Yeah.
Darth Maul spinoff. Okay, let's get this one done and put to bed here. I gave Solo a Star Wars story a rousing 4.5
Okay.
overall.
I kind of in a similar vein. I thought it was a movie that existed. It wasn't great. It wasn't horrible. 4 out of 10.
All right.
I'm going to give it a shockingly high score of 6 out of 10, which is 0.5 higher than
Okay.
0.5 higher than what did you say?
Rogue One.
Wow.
That's fair. I had this at a 5, and I just took it down because I thought you were shitting all over it. So, geez.
No, I thought it was pretty good. But enough about that. Can I say something before we move on?
Yeah.
Sure.
The dead speak. The galaxy has heard a mysterious broadcast, a threat of revenge, in the sinister voice of the late Emperor Palpatine.
But only if you played Fortnite. True story. That's where this.
It is true. Oh, that is true.
Wait, what's this now?
Yeah. The whole like dead speak thing.
Yeah.
That message was delivered. Go on.
Before Rise of Skywalker came out, in the online game Fortnite, they actually had some event where they played like a recorded message from Emperor Palpatine, which does not appear in the movie, but is referred to in the opening crawl of Rise of Skywalker.
Really?
Yes. We shit you not.
This sounds terrible.
It is. And
the dead speak.
Does the scrolling text have exclamation point as well?
Yes.
I think it does.
Oh, that's
It sure does.
fantastically not great.
It's literally the dead speak exclamation point. The galaxy has heard a mysterious broadcast, a threat of revenge, in the sinister voice of the late Emperor Palpatine. General Leia Organa dispatches secret agents to gather intelligence, while Rey, the last hope of the Jedi, trains for battle against the diabolical First Order.
Such a last hope.
Meanwhile, Supreme Leader Kylo Ren rages in search of the Phantom Emperor, determined to destroy any threat to his power.
Ooh.
Is the opening crawl to Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker.
He'll be okay. Sidious just challenged him to an acting duel. All right. So I'm just going to start by saying I did not rewatch this one.
Me neither.
This is, I think I've only seen this one once, maybe twice, because I must have saw it in the theater, so maybe twice. Because I think we rewatched all these. The only real scene I can remember in this entire movie is the scene in the Sidious, wrong word, the
Palpatine?
bad, what?
Palpatine?
Yeah, but what are the Sith? God,
Sith,
there we go.
okay.
The Sith temple on whatever the hell planet that is over there. Excuses. I think it's called Excuses. And that's the only real scene I remember in this entire movie, which says something about it to begin with. So there we go.
And leading up to this, I told you guys, I watched through like every Star Wars movie except for one that I couldn't force myself to finish. That was this one.
Oh boy.
Because I got to a point in rewatching it where I realized how things were going. I remembered enough of how things continued on that I didn't want to subject myself to that anymore. Because you remembered the scene from the planet of the Sith and whatnot. The scene I remembered is the fucking knife. the knife with the Goonies map that slides out of it to line up with the crashed Death Star, wreckage.
Oh, okay.
I knew that was waiting for me, and I couldn't. I
mean,
could not, in good conscience, sit through that again.
I did like the idea of going back to explore some of those locations, though. But anyway,
Yeah.
I didn't mention new characters introduced in this movie. Babu Frick.
Babu Frick. The only good thing to come out of this movie.
That's it. That's all I got. Babu Frick.
There was like the little paranoid droid. Whatever.
There was what's her face?
Just Babu Frick.
Felicity.
Oh yeah.
Shagwell?
No.
Jones?
Carrie Russell? Is that her?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Oh, the
I
show
think
Felicity.
so.
Yeah, Carrie Russell's in this.
Yeah.
So I'll take point with this one because I took point with The Last Jedi, and this one's worse.
Yeah, that's all I ever wanted.
I figured that would make you smile, Joe.
Who is this character? Zori Bliss? I don't even remember this character.
She was like a smuggler woman who Poe had a past with, I think, or some shit.
Okay, yeah.
So
she's no Zam Wessel, I'll say that. That's a character.
So I know I kind of gave episode 8 flack for taking everything that episode 7 did and throwing it out. I have to give this one flack for taking everything that episode 8 tried to do on top of everything that episode 7 did and throwing everything in the dumpster and then trying to just cobble together some sort of narrative out of like old pages from comic books and the backs of cereal boxes. That's what this movie feels like. It is a jumbled, incoherent, insulting mess. I don't know where to begin with this because I hate this movie so much.
Wow.
I mean, we can start with Palpatine since we mentioned him already. The fact that they had to bring in a character who's been dead for 2 movies, possibly more, depending on how you're counting these things. And they had to bring him back because they were rudderless without a central villain to center around, and they apparently didn't feel like Kylo Ren would work. Yeah.
I feel like J.J. Abrams was just like so hell-bent on retelling the original trilogy that because I feel like I read somewhere that he had wanted to bring Palpatine back like the entire time. And like I just don't get it.
And I love how the movie begins with, after they get they talk about the message that we don't get to hear. The literal line of dialogue is somehow Palpatine has returned. And that's really, and someone's just like dark science or something, cloning, and it's just like all the explanation we get. And somehow Palpatine has like this cult of other like Sith apprentices or something, which shouldn't work because we were told in one of the earlier movies there's only ever 2 Sith. There's an apprentice and a master. So do we ever
really learn who those guys are? Like they all kind of look like Palpatine, but they're like
the audience more or less.
Yeah, they're like zealots or something. Like it's so weird.
I didn't understand that scene at all. I thought it was like dead people. I thought it was like ghosts.
Yeah, and somehow they are they are also apparently master starship technicians because they apparently are the ones who built the fucking fleet that Palpatine now has at his disposal. And you may have heard my wife in the background saying that that's another reason why Darth Maul was a plot hole in Solo, because there's only ever supposed to be 2 Sith that ever are out there, an apprentice and a master, and he doesn't quite fit in that timeline. But anyway, so yeah, I don't know who the robe guys are. They're evil. That's all we need to know, apparently, according to J.J. Abrams. Yeah, Force Lightning continues to be the most inconsistent force power out there, where it can take 10 minutes to kill.
What about ball lightning, though?
Oh, man, don't get me started. But yeah, Force Lightning, it can take like 10 minutes to not kill one individual, yet it can destroy an entire fucking Starfleet and with like the flick of a wrist, apparently. I hate this movie.
I was checking other criticisms people have online. The light speed skipping scene, where they chase through a variety of locales in a matter of seconds, even though they've already talked about how dangerous this is in all of basically every other movie.
Yep, and somehow they don't crash into anything. I mentioned the knife. Okay, so if you haven't seen this movie, there's this whole long MacGuffin hunt where Kylo Ren has what is like a Sith transceiver or something like that. And there's another one of those out there that are pointing the direction towards where Palpatine is, the apparently the ancient Sith homeworld or something like that. And so the good guys are searching for the other one, and it's this convoluted planet hopping scavenger hunt where at one point they end up falling through quicksand into a cavern underneath the quicksand,
Oh my God.
which should be full of quicksand if the quicksand is above it. But they fall in there, and there's like dead bodies, and one of the dead bodies has this. I mean, it's desiccated, so it's been there a while, and it has this old ancient knife that has like Sith writing on it, and they need C-3PO to decode the Sith writing, but his programming won't let him, and that's where they lead to Cody's favorite character, who has to like, yeah. So they get C-3PO to be able to read the writing, which is like coordinates to, I don't quite remember. It's a mess. But they get to wherever it's pointing them, and it's a planet where the part of one of the old Death Stars has crashed, and they're going, they're trying to figure out why it led them there. And one of the characters, again, I stopped watching at this point, so I don't remember who. They find like this little knob on the side of the knife, and they pull it out to this like little like protractor looking thing that they're looking at, and they hold it up against like the backdrop. They happen to be standing in the exact right frickin' spot on the planet, in front of a space station that crashed probably decades, if not hundreds of years after this fucking knife was made. And the little protractor thing they pulled out lines up exactly with the edge of the wreckage of the Death Star. I hate this movie so fucking much. It's not even like a one and done. This entire film is full of crap like this, where nothing is coherent.
But for positives of this film, just to put it on the other side, one, we have Baba Frump, but also pretty sweet lightsaber battle between Kylo and Rey on the water scene there. That was a pretty good fight scene.
Yeah.
And then of course we have the what did you guys think of the closing shot of BB-8 and Rey at the farm on Tatooine?
Are you trying to make me mad?
The Skywalker Ranch. That was a nice closing, wasn't it?
Are you trying to make me angry?
Just like closing the book on the Skywalker story, really. I mean, anybody can be a Skywalker, but it really closed the book on the Skywalker story, I felt like. So there's that. What about Dio, huh? Right? Little Dio?
Who was Dio?
Ronnie James Dio was in this movie?
Ronnie James Dio was BB-8's sidekick. Yeah, he was.
I'm trying to remember this droid.
It's the little guy that has the wheel and like the old style light head. He looks like a little lamp.
Really skittish around people. That's all I remember. I stopped watching before it did anything important this time around. I
look up Ronnie James Dio. You'll see them.
Oh, that guy. Yeah, he was cute.
Yeah, he wasn't bad.
I don't remember if he did anything in the movie, but
I mean, I don't know if we needed another cute droid besides BB.
It's
like BB-8 needed a pet or something. I mean,
Bobber Fruit. This article I'm reading says he has the wonderful line, "Hey, hey."
Oh
and
boy!
His second best line was, "Hey, hey,
hey."
So it's Fat Albert.
Babu Frick is Fat Albert, which makes Star Wars # problematic now. So there's that.
So here's my deal with this movie.
Okay.
It is a complete mess. None of it makes sense. None of it relates to anything else that has come before it, really. I did not entirely hate it. And honestly,
did you see the ending?
there's despite the like Rey being a clone of Palpatine thing, which like I hate that. I hate it so much.
Me too.
It completely throws out the whole like it doesn't matter where she comes from thing. So that really fucking pisses me off because it's already like discarding that. But even with that nonsense being in the movie, I feel like it could have still been saved if very end of the movie, she's standing there at the old Skywalker Ranch, as Cody referred to it. And the old lady comes up and she's like, "What's your name?" And she says, "Ray." And the old lady says, "Ray who?" And she says, "Ray Skywalker." If instead of that, she had just said, "Just Ray," boom, like I would have forgiven all of the fucking problems of this movie. If it had just held on to that one basic idea that even though she was a clone of the Emperor, that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what her background is because that's not who she is. Like, by her having her say, like, "Just Ray," they still could have clung to that idea and it still would have worked for me. And I would have forgiven this movie all of its sins. But they didn't do that. They had her say Ray Skywalker, which makes no fucking sense at all. And I hate it so much.
Wait, but in episode 8, that's the whole premise. Anybody can be a Skywalker. It doesn't matter where you're from.
It's not. That's not what
I thought that little kid in the stable, he could be a Skywalker if he wanted to.
No.
Oh.
I will say, like, when this movie was coming out, I mean, I listened to a lot of pop culture podcasts and read a lot of, stuff about movies and whatnot. And there was a theory going around that after they announced the title, The Rise of Skywalker, there was a theory that some people had that it might be that Skywalker becomes a name for a new class of Force wielder,
okay,
which they theorized would be something more in line with a gray Jedi, which I think is a concept I might have talked about when we were talking about like Book of Boba Fett or something before, Cody. But apparently in the extended universe, there's this concept of a gray Jedi, which is someone who is neither light side nor dark side, but kind of rides the line in between the two. And
would it be fair to say they ride the lightning?
Yes. But like, I think that's an interesting concept, and I kind of thought that was something that The Last Jedi was maybe getting towards, with Luke talking about how the Jedi had to end. Because if you think about it, the idea of someone having to be like a pure like paragon force of good is kind of bullshit. Like, it would suck being a Jedi because you're supposed to be this virtuous, like chaste, perfect person all the time, and like, that's one of the problems with the prequel trilogy is like Anakin's big downfall is that he falls in love. Like, oh my God, it's terrible. So I think it would have been interesting if they had gotten to a place where it was like, oh, maybe the Jedi thing is problematic too. Maybe the best way to be is somewhere between the two, where you can fall in love with someone and have some feelings and emotions without being pulled into like the terrible dark side. But like, they don't do anything interesting at all in this movie.
Palpatine was alive. Did you see that?
Yeah, but it's like, it's just like a hard swing back to the whole like,
okay,
Skywalker chosen one bullshit. Oh man, I just hate it so much.
Well, they didn't ruin Han Solo in this movie. So it had that going for it.
And that's the other, I mean, going back to briefly to, Carrie Fisher passing, like apparently originally the one idea they did have for the trilogy was that episode 7 was going to be Han's movie, episode 8 was going to be Luke's movie, and episode 9 was going to be Leia's movie. But then Carrie Fisher dying, unfortunately, threw a wrench in that whole plan.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're going to say, Cody?
Two things. I was going to say, one, I just now read Justin's background somehow. And two, I had forgotten that she was a clone of Palpatine until you guys said that. So I might have just buried that really far down.
Yeah. I think my rating for this movie is actually going to go down even further. Good. Should we
move on to the dark side? Are we ready to throw a number on this bad boy?
Do it.
Let's do it.
Yes.
I'm going to go down a number as well because I had forgotten the whole clone part of this. So this is a train wreck. 2 out of 10. Final word.
Only because the only movie I can give a 0 out of 10 to is a movie that wasn't finished. It's 0.5 out of 10. I despise this.
0.
Oh,
Okay, it's 0.5. Okay.
0.5.
I was originally going to give this a higher rating, but now I'm actually going to match Cody and give it a 2 out of 10.
Ooh, what'd you have originally?
Originally I actually had it at a 4.5.
Oh, wow.
I mean, I honestly, it infuriated me, but I did not hate the ride on the way there. There were things about it that I enjoyed. It was still a Star Wars, but having this discussion, I'm just getting more and more angry at it. So, I think it is
flow through you.
I think it is surpassing Attack of the Clones as the worst of the Star Wars movies for me.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, in my opinion, it is by far the worst.
All right.
Because it Attack of the Clones, it wasn't good, but it didn't actively hurt the franchise. This, I feel, was just shitting all over it. I mean,
the only, positive of this movie, I guess, is wherever they decide to take the movies from here, like they got a clean slate at this point because they just put it in the trash, lit it on fire, ate it for breakfast, shit it back out, let it go in the septic field, plugged up the pipe, had to dig it back up, found the shit, caught that on fire, repeated the process. So now,
yeah, I mean, it is a shame though because like I did really like Rey as a character. I would have liked to see more movies with her, but like I don't want to see Rey Skywalker. Like I have zero interest in that being a thing.
Fair.
Unless they bring her back, but just try to distance themselves from that whole thing moving forward.
Yeah.
I feel like otherwise I feel like they've kind of ruined that character, which sucks because she was pretty good for the first 2 movies.
Maybe episode 10 starts with the person she told Skywalker to just being like, no, you're not.
No.
Somehow Luke Skywalker returns.
You're just the child of some filthy junk traders who sold you for drinking money.
Her dad's Watto, you know it. Well, gentlemen, should we read some results from our quite lengthy, likely to be 2-part episode here?
Sure.
Do it.
We'll start at the bottom. And surprising no one here, with an aggregate score of 1.5 out of 10 is The Rise of Skywalker.
Woo!
So that is that. Getting a nice jump here. 2 points ahead at 3.5 is The Phantom Menace, coming in 10th place. And we have coming in at 9th place with a 4.5, Attack of the Clones. And coming in at number 8 with a 4.833 average, we have Solo. And at number 7, we have The Last Jedi with a 5.333. Right ahead of that is Revenge of the Sith at a 5.666.
Oh,
Hail Satan!
Number 5 is The Force Awakens at a 6.166. Number 4 with a 6.33. Just ahead of that is Return of the Jedi. Number 3 is Rogue One, mostly buoyed by my 10, I'll be quite honest, but still had a respectable 7.166. And then our top 2, a little bit of jump ahead of that, is New Hope at number 2 at 7.833. And a big jump up here to number 1, Empire Strikes Back with a 9.33 overall.
Yay.
Which is, that's almost a 1.5 higher than the thing we had at number 2. So
yeah,
that's really not
unanimous.
All that close. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or a better way to put it, maybe it just hit well for everybody.
Yeah.
And raised the average up a bit. So, wow.
That's a little better.
Right. Well, this will be all of us here starting year 2 for everybody. This is going to be different themes sung for our theme song here. Justin's doing the Imperial March. Joe is doing the Duel of the Fates theme song for us in the Friends Occasionally Not Disagreeing. And I will do the episode 9 theme song. All right. Till then, everybody, we'll see you next time on
Friends.
Not disagreeing.
Occasionally not disagree. I don't know.
This movie sucked. Friends Occasionally Not Disagreeing. There we go. This podcast is a clone. of Senator Palpatine.
Burn it
Well, at
with
this point, who
fire.
isn't?
Warwick Davis, that's who. Palpatine is a clone of Warwick Davis.
Suddenly it all makes sense.
It does, doesn't it?